and I want to welcome you to another episode of Beyond the Surface Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer, and this afternoon we have a special guest, John Fountain, author, editorialist, professor. I am excited to have this discussion around an editorial that was put out December 19, 2013 in the Chicago Sun-Times. And the title of that editorial was The Truth About What Real Men Do. And I just want to welcome you, John. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Okay, so I have my daughter at a daycare in Maywood, Marjorie Dial, and they religiously Xerox your editorials and lay them out for their parents. So I happened to be passing, and I saw the title, and I stopped and I grabbed it up, and I read it, and I was really, really excited and intrigued about your perspective on what it means to be a real man, particularly in the millennium, and especially with the whole adult popular culture and what media has done in terms of shaping image. And it's interesting that you work for media and you also have a voice to kind of counter some of what media pushes forward. The first question I want to ask you is, okay, the initial response came from a male reader. How did that strike you when you found out that one of the male readers actually was challenging you and saying that you fell in the Terry McMillan, men ain't nothing camp?
Well, it was a bit alarming, but to some degree, I think it was to be expected. I think sometimes when we as men talk about what we ought to be doing as men, there are some brothers who, even in the closest of circles, will say, "Well, who do you think you are, and who are you to criticize us?" And there's enough black male bashing going on, and so. As a black male, I do understand and am sensitive to that kind of bashing that has happened, since, post-slavery, Jim Crow, up until now. And I think, so much of it is bashing and unfair. But I think in order to get better as a people, to get better as men, we have to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. And I'm the first among, as a critic, as a social critic, as a columnist, I am one who says, look, I've got faults too. But I've always been challenged to understand that, it isn't just having your faults by which you judge a man, but it is that man's ability to look in the mirror and say, I have faults, but let's see how I can improve. And we need to do that collectively. So I was a little bit surprised, but not totally taken aback by it. But what I've learned in these last 5 years as a columnist is, what I've decided is, if you write to me, if you have the nerve to say whatever you want to say to me, then you better be prepared for the response.
Okay, and what? One of the things that I loved about it was that you did accept the challenge and you exposed it, because you could have really honestly just tucked it, maybe came home and fussed about it to your family and friends and moved forward. There is a mindset, there is a whole Terry McMillan-ish kind of crew, but I also think there's a whole focus in general on flaws and failings of particularly black men.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not even going back as far as Jim Crow or civil rights. I look at just the women's lib movement where
Yes.
Black women were encouraged to burn their bras with, Gloria Steinem and the team to default. What are your thoughts on that? What the results of how black women see men as sort of residue from that whole woman's movement period?
I think that's an interesting word, residue, and sometimes it is my sense that is exactly what it feels like. Sometimes I have heard over the course of my adult life black women espousing equal rights, for themselves, and certainly, we were slaves together, so let's be free together. I'm a brother who believes that.
Okay.
But I also say, that we have always, the struggle for black men and black women we've always been in the struggle together.
Yeah.
And if the master came in and took my daughter, for instance, or took my mother or took my grandmother, for his own pleasure. You don't think that as a black male that wasn't grievous to me, and that when I stand and fight, or when I, as a columnist, articulate for our people, I'm not articulating simply for black men, but I'm articulating and advocating for all of us. Because if we don't all make it, if we're not all free, we ain't free. And so it is almost this kind of separatist kind of ideology that really kind of serves to divide us as a people. And our struggle as black men and as black women is a collective. It should be a united struggle for freedom and equality for all of us.
Well, you described some qualities as you're walking through this article. It's easy to see what amounts to just some standard character qualities, because you said we do have to train our daughters how to sift and separate, how to really recognize when they are in the presence of really a man becoming. Because based off the article, you're saying, look, men are flawed. They're going to come with some shortcomings, but you don't necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So some of the things that stood out to me was you said, okay, he's giving, he's respectful, he cherishes, he honors, he's a comforter. When I think of men, I always think of them as protector first. I think that my brother was a protector, my father was a protector. I affected my best male friends when I was in school. Usually they looked out for me because they were stronger, swifter, faster, and that goes into some of the vocabulary where you describe them as warriors. Where is the breakdown with the wanting to unite and wed? You talk about, he should be willing to put a wedding ring on your finger, but in general, the black community is not embracing marriage.
Well, I saw an interesting article not too long ago that talked about really looking at the economy of marriage, of why people should get married. And the article simply ultimately broke down this way. It said that, for men, it is, and particularly in the black community, they are a hot commodity. They have their choice in terms of marriageable mate, a female. And the truth is my daughter, as I look around in her high school, the number of girls far outnumber the number of boys at her high school.
Yeah, and boys have figured it out. They figured out the math on it about
yes,
it's like 7 to 1, 9 to 1.
It is phenomenal, and so I know that I have a 12-year-old son, and my daughter is 18, and my son has different challenges. Will have different challenges than my daughter in terms of choosing a mate. My son is essentially in the driver's seat. He's intelligent and so on, no more intelligent than my daughter, but he has he is the one who has essentially the pick of the litter. And so that said, I think it's important still for me to teach my son how to treat women.
Okay.
It's important for me to teach my daughter what to expect in a man.
Okay.
Because given that article, it says that because men are aware of this, that they're aware that there are any number of women who are willing to give them the spoils of marriage without actually having to marry them.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow, the spoils of marriage, so they get the benefit of it.
Yes.
With no commitment, no obligation, no responsibility.
My grandmother the sweet grandmother would say it this way. She told my cousins, "Why buy the cow when you can get the milk free?"
Yeah. Absolutely.
And she'd say, "Don't choose a date that's not fit for a mate." And she got a whole bunch of those sayings. And so I think this article, in terms of the truth about what real men do, is not only my response to this brother, this male reader, who wrote me saying that seemed that I had joined the Terry McMillan Club, but is also my moral obligation to my daughter. And it is, this is a snippet of the kinds of things I have told her from the time she was about 12, if not beyond, about what to look for in a spouse. We have this game we play. How do you recognize a bum? Some people may be offended by that, but I don't want my daughter to marry a bum.
Okay.
And
Well,
how
why
to.
should they be offended if we know that moms exist?
You would be surprised. I could share my reader email with you, and some people almost, their response is, "Oh, you think your daughter's a princess, and you're putting her on the pedestal." Yeah, I do, and you should think the same about your daughter too. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem, And we have to. What kind of father would I be if I didn't warn my daughter about what exists out there? I don't want her to have any surprises. And I also don't want her shallow. I don't want her to think that a man's true value or worth consists in the abundance of things he possesses. Right. But I want her to be able to look at the heart of a man and to see someone who truly loves her, someone who's going to be a provider, a producer, or a protector. Mm-hmm. And as long as I get breath in my body, anybody short of that comes to my door.
Well, it's interesting that you focus so much on your daughter, because my firstborn is male, is a son. And so I understand your math. Your math is absolutely right. There are far more women, and the pick of the litter is grand and everything. But I'm always looking at bloodline and legacy and who you're going to leave, your assets to. And so what are your thoughts on telling young men, look, I know you got the pick of the litter, but don't spill the seed. The seed means something.
Oh, I have a whole other series that I've written in terms of speaking young men, particularly young black men. And as a matter of fact, I'm working on a book called Dear Son, Lessons on Life. Okay. And the truth is, if we are going to heal as a people, we have got to deal with the issue of black males. We have got to heal black men. And I don't want my son ending up being one of those broken black men who ends up spending so much of his adult life trying to get well. So there are many lessons that I share with him as well. I love them both. It is a different set of issues for my son than it is for my daughter. Okay. I think collectively, if they're whole, it speaks to the wholeness and potential wholeness of us as a people, as a family. But I tell him, what to beware of and what to, how he should carry himself. Mm-hmm. And I will say that he is a caring young man, and he cares about people, cares deeply about people. One of the things at 12 years old that he talks about doing is he wants to help create prosthetic limbs for people who are that have disabilities in walking and. Pretty nice. And so, and I tell him, and even more than telling him, it is by what I show him about what's important, about trying to be before him, stand before him as the kind of man that I want him to be, except I want him to be better than me. Mm-hmm. And
which was always something that was a black thinking.
Yes.
That, even if we were great, you were supposed to be better than great.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's the goal. And so, I told my wife years ago, number one, I tell my children, I say, Daddy's not perfect. I have my imperfections, but I want my mistakes to be your mistakes so that you don't have to make the mistakes I made. I was a teenage father. Don't make that mistake. Let me tell you what I wish a father had told me. Okay. I show my daughter love, what it feels like to have the hug of a man that is platonic, that wants nothing from her in return except to see her blossom and excel.
Wow.
And I tell my wife, I said, some years ago, we were married 22 years, I said, I'm not perfect, but here's what I want you to do for me. If you ever see me stop trying to be a better man, leave me.
Wow. That's an incredible gift.
Well, it is what I owe.
It's her choice.
It is what I owe.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
It doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes as a man. And in some of my writing, in all of my writing, what I try to do, I'm trying to make a difference. But I'm also, even when I'm critical, I am in my heart saying to brothers, saying to sisters, look, we all fail. Mm-hmm. But the only way we're going to get better is to look at ourselves in the mirror and to get up and do better.
Yeah, it did. Your editorial felt like the ultimate mirror test. That's exactly, portions of it felt like the ultimate mirror test. So I can see where, that is vital. Okay, so I the whole concept of black males and maturity. When I was a kid and I listened to music and I followed, and of course entertainers played a far less important role than they play now. We just didn't worship them. Now they're worshipped.
No.
But again, we have media, and this is, our kids are flooded and exposed to it, and even us adults are, have given up to it. So when I was a kid, the OJs these was adult men. The Gap Band, these was grown people.
Yes.
So I wonder, what is your concerns about black male and maturation? Just getting the time to mature. Now I think oftentimes about Tupac. The direct line of the Black Panther movement. Even his godfather was Geronimo Pratt. Finally freed after so many years of incarceration. Okay, so but he didn't make it beyond 25, even with a complicated blend of wisdom and street whatever. That I've often thought, like, if he had just had time to grow up, like you could tell, like he had enough to work with, but it still just wasn't enough. What are your thoughts about black men and maturing?
Well, I think you are exactly right. I think we live in a day and time where we are worshiping at the altar of hip hop, and we have when we were growing up, we, as you say, it was the OJs, it was Teddy Pendergrass, and Teddy Pendergrass at least just said turn out the lights and light a candle. And the lyrics today are so explicit, and they are coming at us. We are bombarded with those messages on the internet, on our radio stations, and I almost want to write a column that says to local hip hop urban radio stations, stop the music. That's a conversation for another day. But I think the media does play a critical role in, I think, creating these images and creating an atmosphere in which our children are being consumed. But I also think that as parents, we have to control the media. I was doing the media that comes into our home. I was doing a television interview not long ago with someone, and one of the panelists looked over at me and said, do you mean to tell me you can control what your children watch in your home? And I laughed and said, yeah. I turn my television off. I can blow it up if I want to, break it up, or disconnect the cable. So as parents, I think we have to maintain that control. In terms of black males and maturation, my son just turned 12 on Saturday, and I want him to remain a kid for as long as possible. And that is important for me. I don't want him taking on man-sized responsibilities. I don't want him being exposed to everything that exists in the world because, I think, some would say that childhood is a luxury and a mythology. I don't agree with that. It is childhood, right. And I think it is too often stolen. And as a crime reporter for many years who covered homicide and have been in some depraved conditions, hardly fit for animals, let alone humans. I've seen this kind of this decay happen within our community, and some of it has to be linked to the exposure of our kids to things that they should no human should be exposed to, let alone kids. Right. And I think also reading a book called Way of the Wild Heart that a friend gave me. And in this book, it has the contention that manhood is something that has to be bestowed. You can't simply inherit it.
Right.
His contention is that a man must teach a young man how to be a man. And in the African-American community, there really is nothing cultural that is a kind of celebration in terms of a young man's induction into manhood.
Well, so, now it's getting cases.
Yeah.
Court cases.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that.
I was a long-time high school teacher, and that's what my kids would debate about.
Wow.
And I got 2 cases. I got 3 cases. Cases? I don't want to go to court.
No, I want no cases.
Right.
And that's amazing. And so I think we have to change the mindset. We have to write a new script. We have to write a new story. And I'll tell you that for my son's 13th birthday next year, we're planning to have something similar to a bar mitzvah, not a bar mitzvah that's Jewish, but my Jewish friends have explained in my study and understanding what it is, just this public community family recognition that for this young man, he is entering into manhood, and that there is an expectation, that there is great responsibility, great privilege, and there's great celebration by us in what this means.
Absolutely.
And so we have to bestow manhood upon our sons, and it means mentoring, coaches, teachers, deacons, and pastors, people taking an active part in young men's lives. But it also, and I'll get in trouble for this, it also means sisters being more conscious and deliberate about who they have children by.
Absolutely. Absolutely, which is why we're having this discussion, because you said what real men were. I don't remember. I don't think it's from this article, but I remember reading something else by you, and you said, well, if they're all dogs, then the women are dog catchers. And I thought, wow, that stings. But I also loved it because that's exactly what it makes you. You're catching them. This is something that you are attracting to yourself, that you want for whatever reason, and all of it goes back to yourself. I assume as a woman, when I've loved myself more, I've thought that I could have more and thought more. And when I was loving myself less, I, even whether subliminally or on purpose, I aligned myself with that. So, absolutely. Okay, well, as we're wrapping up, you talk about real men and pretenders. You talk about flaws and failings. But then you also talk about truth, being able to have a standard and, the ability to stand as an adult man. What does that really mean? Because what I'm seeing is, and I even I'm in my 3rd marriage, very much in love, and, we're working on it, but just because I'm an intellectual. I'm from Detroit. I'm not. My husband is fresh out of the projects. He's from Cabrini, and so he's dated that style of woman. And he's told me, you're a huge challenge for me, but I adore you. But his family and friends have struggled to accept, what could this be? What could this mean? And so, we get back to standard. It's not that I'm a poly purebred or I'm snooty or whatever. It's just stuff I can't do, or places I don't go, things I'm not a part of, and I'm not downing you, but I'm not for you. This is what you chose. How do you? But he struggled to say that for me. He has struggled to just say, I love her. I have a great wife. And that's just that. And these are the qualities that I've changed. My lens has changed, and these are the qualities I want for myself. What is it that where men, even when they know they need better, when they find it, that they can't stand or they struggle to stand on a standard?
Wow. I think that this is a really powerful and interesting question and issue. I think it's so important for young men to have modeling.
Okay.
Because when you see it and touch it and know that it's real, it can become real for your life. I was talking to a group of men about my latest book, Dear Dad, and they were reading, and I had to have this exercise I have them do. And the exercise says, if you could say anything to your father, what would you say? The challenge is to stand up and to speak as if you're talking to your father, whether it's good or bad. And you begin with the words, Dear Dad. And those men began with Dear Dad, and everyone was crying. Everyone.
Wow.
And they revealed the deepest hurt, There was not a man in there who did not have some brokenness that went back to his father. And I'll make this short. The interesting part was there was one man who said he had challenges of being a father because he was divorced, but he struggled to go and see his kids. He would make great sacrifices to see his kids and so on. And he was just telling his father how great he was, how happy he was to have had an example. And after this older gentleman got done, there was a young man who was sitting across from him, and he looked at this older gentleman who had been his friend since he got out of prison. And he said, "Brother, you don't know this, but I want to thank you because I went on some of those trips with you on the weekends when you were going to see your kids and driving for hours and hours." He said, "I didn't know black men took care of their families."
Wow.
I never saw that.
Mm.
And so what we have now is a generation who don't know what it's like for a man to bring his money home at the end of the week.
Yes.
Who don't know what it's like to see a man come in when at the appointed time, to wake up, to go to sleep and wake up with your daddy in the house, to have him kiss you and say, "Have a great day in school," to have him show up for PTA meetings, to have him on the sidelines when you're running in track or playing basketball. And I want to tell you that I didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can tell you that there is hope and that we can change if we are willing to embrace wholeness, functionality, and God's promise for our life.
Wow. That's amazing. And I guess I almost had to catch myself because I was over here and I teared up. And part of it is that, one of the things that pushed me out of the classroom is what you said earlier. If you ask a question, you have to prepare for an answer.
Yes.
And young people talk. And so I had many young men come to the desk and describe their fathers as, sperm donors and, imagine if they saw him, what they would do. They would beat him up. They would ignore him. They would slash their money. They'd make it rain on them. They used to tell me all this, this kind of foolishness and talking. What it really amounted to was really not understanding what a real man was, what he could do, and also having experienced a lot of emotional abandonment.
Yes.
Like if this cat had just sent me a card, like a letter from jail, anything, like they really actually would have, treasured it.
Yes.
So that gets back to earlier. You were talking about, you started off really emphasizing hurt, that in order to really get the community back strong, the issue of black men and black male in general and hurt issues have to be tackled. If that's the case, John, why do we not discuss that? Because there's not a lot of there's a couple of people like I think about Kwanzaa Kunjusu who focuses on black men, but black, at least young black males. There's not a lot of just, people just charging, although they fill up penal systems, they're hurting one another. Why is that?
Well, I think part of it is if I'm hurting, and you say that you have a prescription or for my remedy, and you talk at me, but you don't talk to me.
Okay.
And you have no relationship with me.
Yeah.
There are some brothers who, could come to me and say certain things, and I'd be like, "Man, get out of here. I'm not trying to hear you." But there are a couple of brothers in my life who I know mean me only good.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have an agenda. And they are as vulnerable and as transparent as I need to be in order to get that healing. So this exercise that I talked about that I do with these men, the first thing I do is I share my testimony.
Okay.
I tell them about
you make yourself vulnerable.
I
you
do.
Tell the truth.
You have to do that. And when they see that and they understand, man, this brother is just like me, and he's revealing these hurts, one by one I've seen it. They want to talk about it. We don't fully embrace and understand what it means for a young man or for a young woman, a little boy or girl, to be abandoned by the man who was supposed to love them first.
Mm-hmm.
And the hurt that is associated with that. In the Bible, the scripture says that when Jesus was baptized, the Spirit of God descended like a dove, and a voice said from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." And we've had no public proclamation by these fathers of who these children are. I say that many times in my life I felt like no man's son.
Wow.
I cringe to even say it. It comes from my soul. And so that is the kind of healing that needs to take place in our community. We've got to have a conversation to understand if you see a brother who's so angry that he would shoot another brother in the head and walk away. There's some deep hurt associated with it.
Yeah, that's not just impulsive. Like, that actually came from somewhere.
Yes.
Built up in him.
Yes. And I personally witnessed my friends and family, brothers who were like that, who were not able, who did not get the kind of healing that so many of us get. And you got to want to be better. You got to want to be better. And, you know, and I say in my piece that real men fall but get back up.
Absolutely.
They fail but never fold. They acknowledge their faults but don't make excuses. Have weaknesses but still stand strong. Would rather die standing for something than live 100 years standing for nothing. Being a real man is hard, but I tell you, it is rewarding.
Wow.
And it's priceless.
Why? As we wrap up, tell people why. What makes being a real man priceless?
It goes to the heart of who God made me.
Okay.
It goes to the heart of who I am. It doesn't matter how much money I make. As they say, I've never seen a U-Haul following a hearse.
Yeah, you got that right.
I came here naked. I'm going to leave here naked.
Yeah.
And my legacy, if I don't give it while I'm here, while I'm breathing, when I'm dead, there is nothing left.
Nothing.
And so the way to live on eternally, even we're going to live eternally, my faith says, somewhere. But the way to live on this earth, to have an impact, is to pour into our children, pour into our families, pour into the lives of other human beings. And that's what makes us worthy. It isn't the kind of car I drive. Someone once told me, Negro, and they use the other N-word.
Okay.
I knew you when you weren't nothing.
Mm.
And my response is, you never knew me. Because even when I was on welfare, I was something.
Mm-hmm.
Even when my daddy left me, I was something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the worth of the worth that is bestowed by our Creator. And
remembering that you have a purpose, that you have a reason.
Yes. And that's something money can't buy.
Well, you've been listening to Beyond the Surface Radio. I've been joined by John Fountain. We've been discussing the truth about what real men do. I can honestly say I've grown so much in this discussion. I grew a lot in the just reading the editorial, and I shared it with my mom. My mom's 72. And, old folks, when they support you, they do when I was a kid, it seemed odd, but they do the quirkiest things. She sure put this thing up there on her mantle, like a little frame. She's like, oh, I love this. So you have another fan. But I thank you so much for sitting down for this interview. And until we chat again, be safe in God's grace.
Thank you so much. My honor.